theyeshiva.net.
In the last few days, I received quite a few questions pertaining to Pesach and to the Seder specifically. So I felt, since this is mamish a few days before Pesach, it would be most suitable and appropriate to address these timely and relevant questions. I don't know if they're directly connected to basics of Emunah really, but if Emunah encompasses all of life, so somehow they're also connected to Emunah. Some of the questions were painful to read, but as you know, the objective here is not to address questions that are comfortable, or questions like, you have a good vart for Shabbos, but real questions that are on people's hearts and minds. Real people's hearts and minds. So therefore we don't shun away from questions, and all questions are honored, and all people deserve the dignity that their questions should be listened to and answered. I told you many times, and I truly see this constantly, one of the things that turns off so many people is that when they ask a question, they're made fun of, they're put down, or they're screamed at. If only the teacher or the parent or the educator would say, I don't know. I don't know. Just 3 words, not even difficult. I don't know. It would be giving them the dignity that they're not crazy, and they're not stupid, and they're not horrible people. So every question deserves dignity. Whatever the response is, sometimes I know the response, sometimes we don't know the response. Sometimes we could discover a response, sometimes we have no answers. But the dignity must be maintained, the respect, the kavod habriyos of a person. So I say some of these questions are painful to read, but I'm going to read them as they came in and try to address them to the best of my ability with God's grace. Pesach for me is associated with guilt. I'm always feeling guilty. I never feel that the Seder was good enough, that it was meaningful enough, that it was inspiring enough. I always feel that there has to be something more. There's such a build-up to Pesach, and my whole life I learned that Pesach is such a great night, and yet I never live up to those expectations. I always tell myself the Seder was boring, I was bored, all my kids were bored, I'm always bored. I always feel it was never as frum and as religious as my father, my mother. I could never live up to all of their chumras and stringencies, even though I try. And it just feels very empty, always a letdown at the end of the Seder. Could you maybe give me some advice and some perspective? Okay. Another question. It's hard to write this, but Rabbi, I just want to address this with you. And that is, I have to say that growing up, the most traumatic night of the year was Pesach night. My father was angry, obsessive, no patience, and full of dread. And he made sure that all of us should suffer in the same way. My poor mother was overworked. She hasn't slept nights. The whole Seder was basically torture. If you did something wrong, if you spoke in the wrong way or in the wrong time, or you did anything not that you weren't supposed to do, the consequences were severe. I despised it. My siblings despised it. I have to say that already 2 months before Pesach, I dread the holiday that's coming. The energy in my house was so negative. It was so horrible. And I asked myself, is this what freedom looks like by the Jewish people? Woe unto us if this is the night of our liberty, the night of our freedom. And then it came to stuffing our faces with matzah, and then with maror, and then with the sandwich, and it was always not enough, and not bitter enough, and we had to finish all the cups of wine, and I had to say everything, and if I fell asleep, it was the worst thing. And the Haggadah just went on and on and on, and everybody had to speak and give over all of their teachings and all of their vertlach. It made me sick, it made me traumatized. I still despise it. I do it out of rote. Can I heal? Is there a different type of Seder? Whoa. Anybody relates to this? Huh? Anybody chap patch by the Seder? Used to chap patch at the Seder? You don't even want to talk about it? Another question, a very interesting question. We have been doing the Seder apparently for more than 3,000 years. Shouldn't we reinvent it? It seems to me that it's really boring. I mean, the same matzah, the same wine, the same maror, the same reclining, the same vertlach, the same 4 sons. I think there are many more sons than 4 sons. And the same story again and again and again. It's just very boring. I don't feel part of it. There's nothing meaningful about it. Okay, another question somebody asked. Can you give maybe advice of how to make the Seder more meaningful and more interesting? What should I do to prepare for it? What should I not do to prepare for it? What yes, what not? I'm going to read one more question. I sit down by the Seder always, and I'm always judging everybody by the table. I'm judging my wife, I'm judging my children, I'm judging my guest. Nobody is good enough. I feel anxious about them. I look at them, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. I make these comments, but I know that there's a better way. But somehow I grew up in a house where everything had to be perfect. And I don't know how to respond differently. So I also want everybody to be perfect and everything to be perfect. But a Seder is never perfect. Even though it's called Seder, we all know that it's chaotic. So I get very judgmental and I get into a bad mood as a result. What do you have any advice to me? Okay, there were around another 10 or 15 letters in one way or another seeking advice about these issues. Some more benign, some more sharp, some more positive, some more harsh, some really negative, some charming. So I would like to address them. All the writers, first of all, thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing candidly. I don't know if you're sitting in this room, not all of you signed your names, or you're listening, or you're watching, or you will listen or watch, but I address all of you, and I thank you for writing so openly what's on your mind. I'm going to open up by addressing another question that somebody asked me, a different type of question. And that is a very, very interesting question, that the Haggadah, the Seder, goes through 15 steps. Everybody knows. Kaddish, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, Rachza, Moitzi, Matzah, maror, Koirich, Shulchan Aruch, Tzofim, Berach, Halal, Nirtzah. You see, when I was a child, I behaved. So I still remember these 15 simonim. All of them represent what's the next part of the program. As the children love saying, Kaddish, and the Tata come to him from Shul. It said, I don't want to bring back any too many positive memories. Urchatz, you wash your hands without a bracha. Karpas, you dip the vegetable in the salt water, etc. All the way down to Beirach, which is benching. Halal, which is saying Halal. And then the Seder is over. What's Nirtzah? Nirtzah means that, from the word Ratzain, that the Seder was bavilikt. How did you say it? Bavilikt? Accepted, embraced by Hashem. So the person asks me, he says, what's the point of this? These 14 steps are telling you what to do. It's literally a 14-step program. What's the point of the 15th step where we're not doing anything? Nirtzah, okay, Hashem liked it. I should hope so. I mean, nothing I could do at this point besides redo it. I mean, Nirtzah, Hashem never told me that he liked it, But what's the point of the 15th step? It's not a call to action. It's not a call to activity. There's nothing you're supposed to do. What is this idea of Nirtzah that they put in as the 15th step of the Seder? Which I thought was a very interesting question. And I think that in answering this question, a lot of ideas about the Seder will become extremely clear. Because we don't have its liking in any other experience of Yiddishkeit. We don't put on tefillin and finish Shachris and say Nirtzah, or finish Mincha and say Nirtzah, or finish the Shabbos meal and say Nirtzah. We bench and we move on. You finish davening, you say Aleinu and you move on, or whatever you say, Tillim, whatever you do after davening, learning. By Pesach, we finish the Seder and we say Nirtzah, or we at least read Nirtzah, or we announce Nirtzah, or at least into the Haggadah, even if you don't say it. What is the meaning of this? To understand this, I'm going to bring up another very interesting question. And that is, there's a custom in many Jewish homes that on Pesach night, the children steal the Afikoman. Not all Jewish homes. Many have the tradition that they should not steal the Afikoman. I saw in the Brisker Haggadah Mebeis Levi of Brisk, it says that in the house of Brisk, Reb Chaim Brisker, they didn't steal the Afikoman. The Haggadah of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, I saw it says that he would announce before the Seder that here we don't. There is a custom by Jews to steal the Afikoman, but not in this house. I know in Chabad the custom was not to steal the Afikoman, but the fact is that the Chak Yaakov brings that there's a minig that the children chap, they steal the Afikoman, they chaytfin, they grab the Afikoman, and of course they return it for a nice prize from Tati and Mami. The basis of it is, you're excited, huh? What's the prize you're going to ask for?
Prize of luck and smartwatch.
Okay, wow. In my days, the rich kids would ask for a calculator. You remember? If you were rich, you got a calculator. If your father was a multimillionaire, you asked for a bike. Today, I think if you would give your child a calculator for the Afikoman, he won't be on speaking terms with you anymore. And he's going to move out to a new house. So we have to come up with more creative prizes for the Afikoman. But the Chak Yaakov says that the source is Gar. A Gemara in Masechta Pesachim Dav Chavtes. Rebbe Lezer says, Chaytvin es hamatzah beleilei Pesachim b'shvil ha'tinoika shelo yishnu. You grab the matzah on the night of Pesach so the children don't fall asleep. Pesachim Dav Kuftes. And the Chak Yaakov says that's the source, that to keep the children awake, you have them grabbing the Afikoman, hiding it, and returning it later, and this makes sure that they remain alert for the Seder. Okay. Others criticize the minig. The Ohr Chaim by the Nesivis says that it's a minig, but it's a terrible thing. It should be eliminated. The Gentiles basically will come to say that the Jews, on the night that they become a people, they celebrate it through stealing. The Rishonim themselves, Rashi gives a different interpretation for Chaytfin. The Rambam a different interpretation. Maram Chalva a different interpretation. But the Lacharoinim give this interpretation. When the minig was created or developed, we're not sure exactly, but it's certainly an ancient custom and it's still practiced in hundreds or thousands of Jewish homes, so certainly there is some meaning to the custom, and it is strange. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to even steal for a joke. You're not allowed to steal and return something. Why would we want to educate children on the night of Pesach to keep them awake through stealing the Afikoman? I want to address something else, which was another email somebody wrote to me, and that is as follows. I feel extremely uncomfortable with two texts in the Haggadah. One text I'm going to address later in the class. The first text I feel very uncomfortable with is what we have to tell the Ben Rasha, the rebellious child. It says, Va'af ata hakeyes shinav. You should stunt his teeth. And you should tell him, Ba'avur ze asa Hashem li b'tzeisim Mitzrayim, li v'lo Eloi, ilu haya sham lo haya nigel. You should tell him that if he would have been in Egypt, he would have never been redeemed. I don't know. I have a rebellious child. I was a rebellious child, and I would not respond well to such a message. Is this really what the Haggadah is advocating in today's day? That if your rebellious child tells you, Maha avoida azois lachem, what does this work for you? You should take your fist and punch him in the teeth, and make sure you stunt his teeth, and then tell him, in case he didn't understand the message, that if he would have been in Egypt, he would have never been redeemed. In other words, you're a lost case. you're a Russia. Leave, Eloi, Eloi. Yetzias Mitzrayim is for me, not for you. You're not part of the Jewish people. Is this really what the Haggadah is saying? And how is this consistent with so many messages that you always talk about from so many sources that you should treat him in a different fashion? Do you have any perspective on this? This is a very interesting question as well. So let me begin with Nirtzah. Why do we say Nirtzah? Why do we have this 15th step at the end of the Haggadah? Why do we acknowledge that Hashem accepted, He was moved, He was happy with our Seder, with our service? Why at the end of the Seder? The truth is that this is the climax of the whole Seder. Without your Nirtzah, you can't have your 15 steps. Your 14 steps. The 14 steps are all a call for action. Washing hands, making kiddush, dipping, speaking, whatever we're doing. Breaking, eating matzah, eating maror, eating a sandwich, eating the meal, eating an Afikoman, saying hallel, everything is an action. But the climax of all of them is Nirtzah. What is Nirtzah? God accepted and embraced the Seder. One of our favorite lines in life is, it's not good enough. We love telling that to ourselves, and instinctively, we love or we don't love, but we tell it to other people. You commit to learning Torah 20 minutes a day. And your ego comes and says, only 20 minutes? What could you already learn in 20 minutes? That's horrible. You spend $15 and buy your wife flowers on Friday afternoon. Your ego comes to you and says, that's all you spend on your wife? $15? You give somebody collecting money for tzedakah $10, and your ego comes and says, that's not good enough. You have to give him much more. You sit down Friday night to the meal, and you have a meal, and your ego comes and says, that's not called keeping Shabbos. That's not what a meal looks like. Any project, anything we do, there's a little voice that comes in and says, it's not good enough. This voice is usually the voice of the Yetzer Hara, of the negative inclination, or of the false ego. You see, a person should always improve. A person always has to improve. A person always has to grow. But that's not the intention of our Yetzer Hara, and it's not the intention of our false ego. It has one intention. When it puts in that voice into you, it's not good enough. The intention is to suck the life out of you and to make you feel like a loser and to put you into a depression. Look at the results. When you tell yourself it's not good enough, what's the next step? Is the next step motivation, inspiration, or invigoration? Or is the next step you feel lousy, you feel empty, you feel sad, you feel horrible? Does it make you a bigger person or a smaller person? Does it inspire you to do more or to do less? When we start thinking that our actions are worthless, it drains us from our vitality, from our zest. It makes you feel dejected, melancholy. And therefore, it ultimately causes people not to do more. It causes people to do much less. So when we hear this voice, don't think it has to do with truth or it has to do with God. It has to do with a false ego, what we call a Yetzer Hara, that literally wants to put you down. Once something was done, it will always tell you that it was not good. There's an old word from Darshanim. It says in Parshas Bereishis, Vayara Elokim es kol asher asa, v'hinei toiv ma'od. Hashem saw everything He made and it was very good. So the Medrash Rabbi says, toiv is a malach chayim. Toiv ma'od is a malach hamavos. Good, the angel of life. Very good, the angel of death. What's the meaning of this? So one of the explanations is this, The feeling that we want something to be good, that's the angel of life. But whenever you have a feeling that something can't be good, it has to be toiv ma'od, which means infinitely good, perfect, impeccable, flawless. That's the angel of death. The voice that tells you that things have to be toiv ma'od, infinitely good, that, first of all, kills you inside, and second of all, it kills every project. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Whenever things have to be perfect, it paralyzes us, because there's no such a thing that a person does things perfect. So therefore, when you do something, you say, I did the best I could have done in the moment. And I trust that this sincerity will be seen by whoever the person is, and of course by God himself. So here's the trick. Nirtzah. What does Nirtzah mean? Nirtzah means we're making a statement. God loved your Seder. Period. There's one question that still remains. Could you agree with God? God loved it. He's crazy about it. Nirtzah. How do we know? How do they know? Maybe he didn't like it. We know. You showed up, you were present, he loved it. He accepted your offering. The question is, can you accept your offering? Or do you have to be busy telling yourself how imperfect, how horrible, how meaningless it was? He loved it. Which really, if you think about it, is essentially what happens with the Ben Rasha. What's the Ben Rasha? The one who asked about the rebellious child, we spoke about this last year. We gave a share about the 4 sons before Pesach. I elaborated on it more in some other classes. But really, if you look at the Ben Rasha, what does it say? He says, Ma ha'avoda azois lachem. What is this work that you're doing? What is this? Ma ha'avoda azois lachem. It's interesting. The Chacham says almost the same words. Chacham ha'oimer, Ma ha'edus, v'ha'chukim v'ha'mishpatim, Asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu eschem. He also says, what are all these laws that God commanded you? Him we call a Chacham, and the second one we call a Rasha. Why? He also says eschem. He says, Ma avoda azois lachem. What do you learn from here? The first thing you learn from here is, two people can ask the same question. It's completely two different questions. You can't only listen to the question, you have to listen to the person. Sometimes, brilliant kids in school, inquisitive kids ask brilliant questions. Some teachers love these children, and some teachers feel threatened by these children. So they mock the questions of these children. All the children want is a good answer to a very deep question. They're really great chachamim. Instead, we sometimes destroy the questionnaire. I know of a story, a girl in a class, she asked an excellent question. And the teacher said, I can't believe that this question is being asked in my class. There's a ruach hatuma now that went into the class. Everyone has to say Tehillim. And she made all the girls say Tehillim. Das ist eine Malazach. This girl is a good girl, smart girl. She has to go. Thank God she has a normal father. So the father said, the issue is not with you. There are bullies, sometimes children, and sometimes there are teachers who are bullies. She bullied you. She was bullying you. What is Tehillim? Say Tehillim because of a ruach hatuma, because you asked an intelligent question, because you're not dumb? Chacham ha'oimer. Now you have the Rosh. The Rosh actually is asking a different question. Ma avoda azois lachem. So the Haggadah says, Lefisha hoitzi atzmei min haklal kafa be'ikr. What does that mean? Because he took himself out of the klal, he denied God. What is the Haggadah telling you? Very often, the kfira, the denial of this child is coming because hoitzi atzmei min haklal. Because he does not see himself anymore as part of the collective, as part of the klal. He was made to feel that he has no place in Klal Yisrael. He is the epitome of evil. He is the incarnation of the devil. He represents everything toxic and poison. He was made to feel that he has to take himself out from Klal Yisrael. Now he has to justify it. So how do you justify it? So he becomes a kaifa be'ikr. Now he has to carve out a place for himself in the world because he's not part of the world of the Jewish people. He becomes a kaifa be'ikr. You have to be careful. And what's the eitzah? You have to tell him, Ilu haya sham lo haya nigal. So this is a word of Reb Moshe of Kubrin. He was one of the great Hasidic masters. Reb Moshe of Kubrin. He passed away in... Kubrin is in Belarus, right near Brisk, Lithuania, Belarus. Reb Moshe of Kubrin. So he says... He passed away Tofrei Shut Ches, 1858, actually in Nissan, Chavtes Nissan. So he says as follows. What's Ilu Haya Shamla Haya Nigel? He says a beautiful word. You have to tell the Ben Rasha, I want to tell you something. If we would have had your attitude in life, we would have never been liberated from Egypt. You know why? In Egypt, if we looked in the mirror, you know what we looked like? As the Medrash says, that the Jews were submerged in 49 gates of impurity, Memtes Shari Tumah. And if they would have remained there longer, they could have never come up from it. So if we would have looked in the mirror at ourselves by Yetzias Mitzrayim, we would have said, there's no bright future for us. We're slaves, we will be slaves forever. But you know what? We did not develop that attitude. Our attitude was that redemption is always possible. So we tell the Ben Rasha, Ilu Haya Shamla Haya Nigel. With this attitude that you're worthless, that you have no place, and therefore you have to give up, and you have to despair, and you have to have your place anywhere, we would have never been redeemed. The whole secret of the Jewish people is that we never allowed that attitude to take root. The first mitzvah that was given to the Jewish people was what? Which mitzvah is that? The renewal of the moon. That every month, you create the new month, Rosh Chodesh, based on the new moon. What is the essence of that mitzvah in Egypt? The first mitzvah that was given to them in Mitzrayim before they became a people, what is it? If you follow the moon, you know. The moon waxes, it wanes, then it becomes invisible. And when it becomes invisible, you may think it's disappeared. But what does the moon accomplish? It always experiences rebirth. So the first mitzvah that was given to the Jewish people was, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. There is always the potentiality for rebirth. With your attitude of yiush, of despair, of giving up on yourself, of telling yourself that you don't belong, you're a failure. Why? You have people, you have youngsters who haven't succeeded scholastically. Some of them haven't succeeded emotionally. Some of them haven't succeeded socially. Some haven't succeeded in other areas. And therefore they give up on themselves. And we give up on them. And what happens? And they become bitter. Don't look at yourself that way. But for this, you have to do one thing. You have to get beyond the bite. You have to stunt the teeth. You have to get beyond the bite. If you take the bite seriously, you will not be able to be there for this child. Because when people are bitter or frustrated, they sometimes make comments that are painful. And you have to be able to know that the bark is bigger than the bite, or the bite is not as serious as it seems. Hakayas Shinov. I told you once the Vilna Gaon says that the word Shinov, Shin, Nun, Yud, Vav, is 356. 366. Shin, Nun, Yud, Vav, Shinov. If you subtract 366 from the word Rasha, you end up Rasha's Shin, Reish, Ayin, which is 570. You subtract 366 from 570, you end up with the word Tzaddik. So the Vilna Gaon says, Hakayas Shinov. Go beyond the teeth, go beyond the sharpness of this child, and you'll see behind the Rasha there's a tzaddik. There's a word I once saw from the Nesivos Shalom. He says, we say in the Haggadah, Vayetzienu Hashem Mitzrayim, Lo Ya'idei Malach, Lo Ya'idei Saraf, Lo Ya'idei Shliach, Ela Kadosh Baruch Hu B'chvoidei Ba'atzmai. Why? Hashem sent nobody, only himself. Why? Why couldn't he send anybody else? The answer is, if he would have sent anybody else, they would have come to the Jewish people, and they would have looked at them, and they would have said, Shkatzim, Goyim, horrible, zu schmutzig, you're too dirty, you're horrible. I'm going to make you my people, I'm going to take you out, I'm going to invite you to my table, I'm going to kiss you by Matan Torah, I'm going to become your God, and you'll become my nation. Gibakuk, schmutzig mention dirty people. The Malachim would come back and say, we made a mistake. This is a Mekach Toas. Go find yourself a different nation. So that's why Hashem came himself. He came himself. There would be no mistakes. He would be able to look and see the true core of a person, the beauty of a person. Somebody once sent me cute anecdote. Somebody said he once went to a zebra. You're familiar with zebras in the zoo? Maybe you go to a zoo, you'll see a zebra. So he asked the zebra, he said, are you black with white stripes, or are you white with black stripes? This is a deep lamda shachkira. Are you black with white stripes, or are you white with black stripes? So he says, Vayiftach Hashem es pi hazebra. And the zebra turned to me and he asked me, good question, so let me ask you a question. Are you good with bad habits, or are you bad with good habits? Are you noisy with quiet times, or are you quiet with noisy times? Are you happy with some sad days, or are you sad with some happy days? Are you neat with some sloppy ways, or are you sloppy with some neat ways? Are you self-centered, obnoxious, and narcissistic with some kind moments, or are you kind with some selfish, obnoxious, and narcissistic moments? And the zebra went on and on and on. I'm never going to ask a zebra again about stripes. Yeah. Somebody once said that consciousness, what's the definition of consciousness? It's the annoying time between naps, right? So how do we identify, how do we identify that annoying time between naps? It's really a question of identity. Who are you? Am I really a bad person with some good habits, or am I an awesome person with bad habits? So here is the deal, and it goes to the core of stealing the Afikoman. Really, the whole night of Pesach is about a form of stealing. Why? Some people steal the Afikoman, number one. Number two, the Jews stole the mind of Parah. They deceived Parah. Pasuk says, Ki borach ha'am, they ran away. Rashi says they told them they're leaving for 3 days. They didn't mean it. They ran. They deceived Parah. What else on Pesach? Yaakov took the blessings. He stole the blessings from Esav on the night of Pesach. Pirkei de Rebbe Lezer, Perik Lamed Beis says it was Pesach. Rashi brings it in Parshas told us. That's why Rivka prepared 2 goats for Yitzchak. Yitzchak didn't have to eat 2 goats. One was for the Karban Pesach, and one was Matamim. So it was on Pesach. What else happens on Pesach? Esther says on Pesach, Uvechein Ovei el HaMelech Asher Loi Kados. Yud Gimel Nissan is the Gzeira of Purim, and she says the 3rd day she goes into the king. I'm going to go not legally. In other words, I'm going to trespass. I'm going to trespass the boundaries. I'm going to go into Achashverosh Asher Loi Kados illegally. So you have different things on Pesach that are all revolve a form of stealing. This is a little strange. The night we become a people, we become free. Slaves have to steal. Free people don't have to steal. It's a little strange. But there's a deep message here. And the message here simply and briefly is this. We're stealing from a voice in ourselves. Whatever you manage to do in life, there will always be a part of you that says, you're a thief. Give it back. You took the Afikoman. You know what the Afikoman is? You know how much energy there's in the Afikoman. You're at a Seder. You think you're experiencing the Seder. You're a lowlife. You're a loser. The Seder has the highest energy, but you know it has nothing to do with you. Look at what you're thinking during the Seder. Look at your heart. Look at your mind. Look at your soul. You know you couldn't care less. You're apathetic. You're boring. You're depressed. You're sad. You don't even believe in all these stories. And therefore, you right away give up on yourself. So what you have to tell yourself on the night of Pesach is that the voice in you that calls you a thief because you're stealing things that don't belong to you, acknowledge that that voice may not go away, but that voice will not define me because it happens to be that this is mine. This is who I really, really am. Nirtzah. Believe that just like God loves your Seder, that's a fact, you could love your Seder. Just like God loves you, you could love you. And just like He believes in you, you could believe in yourself. Stop gossiping about how bad, how negative, how detached you are. Do we have in us voices of detachment? Yes. Do we have in us voices of negativity? Yes. Do we have a Mitzrayim in us? Yes. Do we have a Parah in us? Yes. Do we have a false ego in us? Yes. And that will always scream, you're a thief. You don't belong here. You're holding on to things that don't belong to you. Give them back. You know that this doesn't belong to you. And I have to be able to look it in the eyes and say, you might tell me that I'm trespassing, and I say, knowing that the king is there, and me and the king are one, I could go in there. It's really not an issue. I do belong there. I am connected there. That's what the Nirtzah at the end of the Seder is. Now, I want to address the person who sits down by the Seder and judges people. And I think the best way to address it is a word from the Sfas Emes and a word from the Kozhnitzer Maggid. Sfas Emes said, by Bedikat Chametz we use a candle, a feather, a wooden spoon to clean up the bread and burn it. What do we burn in the fire? The bread, the bag, the wooden spoon, the feather. We also burn the candle. Ask the Sfas Emes, why burn the candle? The candle is not chametz. The candle is made of wax or whatever it's made of. Today we don't take candles so seriously because of Thomas Edison. But remember, a candle was a precious commodity. Why take a candle and burn it when it's not chametz? You know what the Sfas Emes says? I have to say it in Yiddish and then I'll translate. He says, Eimitze, was ein ganze Tachlis in Leben ist, zu gefinnen de chametz bei andere, is allein a shtickl chametz. Meaning somebody that his entire objective in life is to find the chametz everywhere, that person himself must be a piece of chametz. The purpose of this candle is to look and look and look and make sure that no chametz gets away. In every hole and every crevice, he will penetrate under the carpets and under the rocks, and the beams and on the ceilings, and the couches and in the beds, in the cabinets and in the drawers, in the little holes. He will find the chametz in you and in your house. Sagt the Sfas Emes, he himself is a piece of chametz. The story about the Balatanya had a chassid, his name was Reb Shmuel Munkus. Shmuel Munkus was living in a little town, and there was a concept called Magidim. Magidim were preachers who would go from city to city and give sermons, and the objective was to scare the living daylights out of the Jews and have them cry and weep, especially before Rosh Hashanah. So this guy came to a city, and he spoke to the city about how sinful they are, and God hates them, and he's going to destroy them. And they were all weeping and crying, and he was very happy because mission was accomplished. And after the speech, Reb Shmuel Munkus went to visit him at Tzoi Shabbos. And Reb Shmuel Munkus takes out a chalaf, a shchita knife. He says, what's this? He says, I'll tell you. We have a big problem. It's brought in halacha that Erev Rosh Hashanah, you should go pray at Kivrei Tzadikim. In our cemetery, we just heard from you, everyone is Rishayim. Our fathers, our Zaydas. We have no tzaddikim in our cemetery. He says, that's true, so how can I help you? He says, listening to you and watching you, I see there's no tzaddik like you. So I would like to have you in our cemetery. So Erev Rosh Hashanah, we could come daven by you. And he takes out the chalaf and he gets close. L'shem yichud kutchabrichu shchinte b'dechilu rechimu hineni shoichet es hatzadik hagadol pe'er hadoir amud hayamin rabban shekol b'nei hagoyla tzadik hadoir kvoit kedushas maron. So we can have you. And this man saw that he was serious. He says, he says, no, we need tzaddikim here in our cemetery. On the sinful people. So he looks at him, he says, ich bin nicht as a tzaddik. I'm not such a tzaddik. He says, oh, you're humble too. Wow, now I'm edge going to kill you. Now you really have a tzaddik. He says, no, I'm serious. He says, listen, serious, I said, legabe us, you're a tzaddik. He says, no, I did sins. He says, Lamashal. He said, yeah, come on, relative to us, you're a great saint. He says, no, I did some more serious sins. He says, for example, the man saw he got no choice. He didn't want to be slaughtered at Rosh Hashanah. So he spoke the truth about his life. Shmuel Munkus looked at him and said, so how do you have the chutzpah to come here and spew such hatred to people when you know how lowly you are? How did Reb Shmuel Munkus know this? Not because he was a Baruch HaKodesh. Because whenever you hear and see somebody who's full of negativity towards other people, it's coming from themselves. It's not coming from the other people. The Baal Shem Tov says other people are a mirror. People who are refined see refinement everywhere. People who are divine see godliness everywhere. People who are brute, who are coarse, who use God as a crutch for their own insecurities and narcissism and fear and shame, they see negativity and darkness everywhere. That's how he knew it. Says the Kajnitz Magid. The first Mishnah in Pesachim is what? Mokim Oilar Bas or Boitkinas Chametz Loir Haner. The night of Erev Pesach you have to check Chametz, but then the Mishnah says one stipulation. Mokim She'ein Machnisim by Chametz Ein Tzarech Bdika. A place where you don't bring in Chametz, you don't have to check. So the Kajnitz Magid says, isn't it a funny thing that people check the Chametz in other people's lives? He said, is that a place where you bring in Chametz? If it's a place that you bring in Chametz, be Baidik. If it's a place that you don't bring in Chametz, you don't do Bdika there. I can't bring in Chametz to your life. I bring in Chametz to my life. Makim she'ein machnisim by Chametz ein tzarich Bdika. Don't do Bdikas Chametz on other people. There's enough Bdikas Chametz to do in your own place where you bring in Chametz. So I tell you, sit down at the Seder table and remember these two insights. The candle you burnt in the morning already, because his job is to search for Chametz. And you are not the person who brings in Chametz to other people's lives. Ein tzarich bdika. Let them be boidik their lives. You be boidik your life. Be wholesome in your life. Stop judging people at your table. Don't judge your family. Don't judge guests. Don't judge your spouse. Look at yourself. And even yourself, you have to know how to judge yourself. The opening words of the Mishnah is, Oilar Bas Aboitkinas Chametz. Asks the Gemara, my Oir. You remember what's Oir? For 2 pages, the Gemara goes back and forth trying to figure out, Oir means light. So when do you have to be Boidik Chametz? In the morning of our Basar, but it's not. So then it's Lael, Oir, back and forth. 2 pages, the Gemara is unclear what Oir means. Finally, the Gemara reaches a conclusion that Oir means the night of our Basar. So the Mefarshim say, why couldn't the Mishnah just say, Leil Arba Asa Boitkinas Chametz? Why give us these headaches? Oir, and then we have to figure out what Oir means. The answer, of course, is, the Meiri says, Pesach Dvarecha Yoir. You start off your words with light, but there's a depth here. And that is, you have to check Chametz always with Oir, mit Lichtigkeit. You can't start Bdikas Chametz with night. If you want to check your Chametz, it has to be with Oir. You first have to identify the light that's in you. If you look at yourself and see yourself as a piece of darkness, don't start doing Bdikas Chametz. You know why? Because the conclusion is going to be that you are the Chametz, and therefore all of you has to be thrown into the fire. And then you defeat the whole purpose. And who comes to the Seder? A shtik Chametz comes to the Seder. Of course you're depressed. You have Chametz at your Seder. They say the Rabbi Zakharith from Slonim, so his wife asked him Erev Pesach in the morning, did you get rid of your Chametz? It's verbrent. So he was very sharp. So he tells his wife, I did. But there's one big piece of Chametz in my life. I already have 41 years in my house. And I can't get rid of that piece of Chametz. Whatever I do, I tried. She will not go away. That Chametz stays. So she looked at him and she says, Eisel, you don't have to worry about that. Jener Stickel Chametz mit 40 Jahren zurück hat mein Tate verkauft zu a Goy Gomer. That piece of Chametz 40 years ago, my father sold to a complete Goy. You really don't have to worry about that Chametz. The problem is we don't do Bdikas Chametz. We decide that we are Chametz. Bdikas Chametz has to be done with the prerequisite of Oir. You have to be able to see the light. That's why Hashem couldn't send Shluchim to Mitzrayim. If he would have sent anybody else, they would have come with a bad, horrible report. He knew he sends himself, it'll be good. It'll be powerful. Now I want to be a little practical in terms of these questions and similar questions. Number one, it's very important. Before you say that, don't be exhausted. People are exhausted, get into bad moods. You can't be exhausted before you Seder. You have to, it's the most important thing, you should be alert. So, and you should, the next thing, be relaxed. Be relaxed. For some people, people think it's a mitzvah the night of Pesach to be miserable and stressed out. It's forbidden. The prerequisite of the Seder before all the halachas is, you're free. You're emancipated. There's nothing holding you back. You're a free spirit. You're uninhibited. Relaxation, joy, serenity. It's the prerequisite of any Seder. That's how you approach the Seder. Number 3, there's no perfect Seder. There's no such a thing. There's no model Seder. People live with this image that there's what a Seder looks like. A Seder doesn't look like anything. A Seder looks like people who are connecting in a genuine way. The only mitzvah in our Torah at the Seder is to eat matzah and one more thing. Haggadah levincha. What's Haggadah levincha? Talk to your child. And the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, it's always with questions and answers. Meaning, you talk after you listen to his questions. Be attentive to your children. Listen to them. Speak to them. Communicate with them. Celebrate with them. Which brings me to another point. What are you going to tell your children this Pesach night? People sit down at the Seder. No. Think about if you could write one letter to your child and you want to leave him with the most important message that you feel he should get from his father, what would that message be? Think about it. Prepare it. The night of Pesach is the one night of the whole year that the Creator of the world designated as the time when Jewish history comes to life. The night of Pesach is not Tovshanai in Zion. It's 3,000 years of Jewish history come to life because it was once a year that was designated for the time when parents give over everything to their children. So their children will give everything over to their children. Each year they made one night to remember who we are as human beings, who we are as Jews. Prepare yourself. What am I going to tell my child? And please, don't tell me it's going to be another Vart. Some people sit down. I saw a Vart. Somebody wrote to me, he says, my father has been saying the same Vertlich for 22 years. I want to shoot myself. And he makes us all listen to the Vertlich. Now, Vertlich are beautiful. Keep your Vertlich for Lag BaOmer. Or after Chad Gadya Echad Miyodeya, you could sit with Eliyahu Hanavi and tell him all your Vertlich. Go through all your Vertlich till 6 in the morning. Don't stop. Remember, Hashem is going to be there and Eliyahu Hanavi are going to be there. They don't get tired. They don't get bored. But was darfst du mutschen under the Yidden? What do you have to torture people? Speak to them for real. Communicate for real. Give them your heart. Give them your soul. Some people don't know how to be present at the Seder. Be present, but think about what you're going to say. And each child needs a different message. There's no one child. The 4 children are 4 extraordinary models. And remember, the 4 children exist within you too. Speak to the 4 children in you. Part of you is wise. Part of you is rebellious. Part of you is simple. And part of you just doesn't give a hoot. She'eni yodea lishal das doesn't mean he doesn't know what to ask. He doesn't care to ask. Das means caring. Va'adam yodes chava. Adam connected to Chava. Doesn't mean he knew her. He knew her Wikipedia entry. He looked her up. Ha'adam yada means he connected to Chava. Eini yodea lisha. He doesn't connect to anything to ask. We have all these 4 children in us. And I have to create place for all these 4 children. Fascinating question. I'm very uncomfortable with one passage in the Haggadah. Shvoi chamoschel hagoyim asher lo yidaucha v'al mamloches asher b'shimcha lo yikaro. Pour down your wrath on the Gentiles who don't know you. Maybe it works for you ultra-Orthodox fundamentalists who think that all Gentiles are evil. But I live in the real world. It's not how you speak today. Shvoi chamoschel hagoyim. I'm thinking of skipping this paragraph. So, whoever you are who asked this question, I appreciate how progressive you are, open-minded, tolerant. I'm glad to see that you don't suffer from bigotry. And I'm happy to see that you're as open-minded as me, and you're as tolerant as me, and that you don't have phobias and stereotypes. But with all due respect, I think you completely misunderstand this paragraph. And generally speaking, don't be so fast to judge our text and decide that if something doesn't work well with you, you skip it. It's good that you ask the question so that you open yourself up to some more information. So let me tell you, in my mind, I find this paragraph to be one of the most enlightened, beautiful things that the Jews could say. And let me give you a little background. When did they put in this paragraph? They put in this paragraph in the Middle Ages, when Jews on Pesach would suffer terribly. First of all, the Christians decided that they're using blood for their matzahs. Number two, Pesach always comes out during the time of Easter. They would come back from Easter celebrations where they would be triggered, mesmerized, and inspired by their priests, bishops, cardinals, spiritual leaders who would incite them against the Jews. Hundreds of Jews, sometimes thousands of Jews were murdered during these times of the year. So at the Seder they put in this paragraph, but listen to what the Jews are saying. And to explain it to you, I'll tell you a little story. Rabbi was once met by a priest, and the priest said, why is it that the New Testament is filled with love? In the Old Testament, God takes revenge. God is zealous. Why can't God be a God of love like he is in the Christian Bible? Rabbi Yonasan told him as follows. He says, let me tell you the difference. By you in the New Testament, what they call the New Testament, you turned God into a God of love. So who has to do all the wars? You. God only loves. So all the violence are done by people. You know what we did? We said all the violence is done by God. He punishes. Our job is to love. That's our job. They once asked Norman Schwarzkopf, he was the commander-in-chief of the first Gulf War under Bush the father, 91. What's your opinion? Should we forgive terrorists? So he said, it's not our job to forgive terrorists, it's God's job. Our job is to arrange the meeting. Okay. But think about Shvoi Chamas Chalagoyim, it's a beautiful prayer. We're turning to Hashem and say this. We know Habal Laharga Chashkim Laharga. If somebody comes to kill you, you have to kill him first. But we're asking at the Seder table is, you pour out your wrath on all the murderers. You take care of all the violence so that we don't have to get our hands filthy with war and violence. Morally, if somebody has about to kill you, you have to kill them. That's morally. We're asking God, you do it. You cleanse your world from all the evil and sadism and barbarity so we could spend our days and nights spreading light and hope and love. In my mind, this is a beautiful, beautiful prayer. I think all your liberal friends would be very impressed with you. There's no need to skip anything, even if you wouldn't understand it. Somebody asks, wine, maror, matzah, 3 ingredients which I dislike. Why do we do this? Is this how you become a free person? It's a good question. I'm going to tell you one point about these 3 things, and you'll tell me. Wine, matzah, and maror are very powerful ideas. They represent very powerful ideas. The path to freedom must include 3 things, and we'll never get bored of them because they're essential to human growth. It's like breathing. The first thing when you want to be free is you have to appreciate wine. And I don't only mean physically drinking wine. I'm talking about what wine represents. Wine is a very powerful beverage. The Gemara says in Erev Nichnas Yayin, Yatzah Soid. Wine comes in, secrets come out. In fact, Yayin is the numerical value of 70. Yud, Yud, Nun, which is the same numerical value like Soid. That's what the Gemara says. Why does wine have that power to reveal secrets? Because wine itself is a secret. Wine is submerged in the grape. It's concealed in the grape, and you have to smash the grape in order to extract the wine. What does this represent in a human life? The first step to freedom is you have to tell yourself, I do not know what is hidden in me. There's tremendous power and energy hidden in me, but I may not know. Sometimes you have to crush the grape to get it out, but it's all in me. It's all there in me. Don't cut yourself short and stop calling yourself the eternal hopeless loser. Wine is incredibly powerful, but if nobody would extract it, we would never know it. That's the same with you. That's the first thing. The next thing is maror. Maror is not easy. Maror is you have to have the courage to be able to look at your pain. You have to be able to look at the places where you broke. If it's a relationship that's not working, you have to be able to go back to those spaces in the relationship where the break happened. You have to be able to go into those moments that created the maror in your life. If you're not ready to look at that, if you're not ready to be honest with that, you're not going to be able to come out of it, because it'll always be there, sitting on you and haunting you. You have to believe in your incredible potential, but you have to be able to steer at the moments of maror, at the moments of bitterness, at the moments of pain. I have to be able to acknowledge it, appreciate it, and put it into context. Step 3 is matzah. The uniqueness of matzah is, of course, humility and vulnerability, but matzah has to be baked in haste. If you wait 18 minutes, it's garbage. The path to freedom must always happen in haste. What do I mean in haste? There will always be a voice that will tell you, you'll start tomorrow. You'll start in a week. You'll start in a month. You'll call back in a half an hour. That is the voice of slavery. The voice of freedom is now. Courage happens now. Confidence happens now. Change happens now. If not now, or at least within 18 minutes, it may be never. Yes, do it tonight. Don't wait till tomorrow. The procrastination, the delay to make the call, to send the email, to make the appointment, to confront what you got to confront, to go visit, whatever it is that you have to do, matzah, haste. So when you eat these 3 ingredients, check in with yourself and make sure that you're on this incredible journey from slavery to redemption. It's a sad email. I'm a single mom. I got divorced a number of years ago. And for the holidays, we split. For one holiday, I get the kids, and another holiday, he gets the kids. We made up for Pesach that I'm going to get the children, 4 children. I cleaned the house for a month, a whole month I cleaned the house. All the children are coming. A whole Pesach they're coming. I finished the cleaning a few days before. I went out to buy everything for the Seder. I was so excited to have all my 4 children at the Seder. I bought what I had to buy. I got all the food. I cooked. I baked. I did everything. An hour before candlelighting, before Pesach, an hour before candlelighting, my ex calls me up and he says, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to bring the children over to the house. Something happened. It's too late. Have a good Yom Tov. And he hung up. I cannot tell you how I felt. A month of hard labor, anticipation, and expectation was just stolen away. It came Pesach an hour later. I lit the candles, and there was nobody in the house. At that Seder, I was alone. Could have I gone to a friend? Maybe. It wouldn't have been comfortable, but I wasn't in the mood, really. I couldn't go to a friend, even if they would accept me. I would sit there anyway in another world. I stayed myself. It was the saddest Pesach I had in my life. How should I deal with this? The hate to him and my upsetness at God. What type of Pesach is it? Did I even fulfill the Seder? This year, I don't even know what's going to happen yet. I'm dealing with an ex who is very, very complicated, suffers from narcissistic personality disorder. If he could do this to me an hour before Yom Tov, he didn't even apologize. Do you have anything to tell me? I don't have much to tell you, that's the truth. I'm very, very sorry for what you went through. It's horrible. It's really unacceptable what he did. An hour before Yom Tov to tell you you're not having the children after you prepared a whole month before. It's absolutely unacceptable. It's inhumane. It's insensitive. It's actually cruel and obnoxious. You should just be aware of that. To do that is obnoxious and completely unmenschlich. It's a very cruel thing to do to any person, even a stranger, never mind the mother of your own children. I don't know your husband, I don't know your ex-husband, I don't know you, so I don't have much to comment about it. I'm just telling you my feeling. In terms of your Seder, I want to tell you something that I saw myself, and I wondered about it my whole life. Not my whole life, I wondered about it for many years. And your email maybe gives me some perspective. Every Jew has a Seder. Even people who more or less have lonely lives, but generally they get invited to some Seder. The shul has a Seder. There's people who invite community members in a Seder. People go to programs. Worst comes to worst, you have a Chabad house, so you can always end up at a Seder. Jews have done. Even very secular Jews have this thing that Pesach they get together. It's a fact that most Jews, even secular Jews, assimilated Jews, do something on the night of Pesach. I don't know any Jew who has nowhere to go with the Seder. Somehow, even in this community, we know there are lonely people, and it's been arranged to have a Seder. I myself dealt in the last few weeks with people who had no place to have a Seder around here. People who are alone, and we arrange places for them. Yidden have open homes and open hearts, and they all got a place in a Seder. I read your email, and a memory comes back to me when I was a young yeshiva bacher. In 1988, the wife of the Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away. They never had children. For many years, he did the Seder with his father-in-law. When his father-in-law passed away, he did the Seder with his mother-in-law and his wife, and some Chassidim. When his mother-in-law passed away, he started to do the Seder only with his wife in their own home. Now his wife passed away in 88, and there's no children. And I wondered who the Rebbe would do the Seder with. Every Jew in the world does a Seder with somebody. After Ma'ariv, he would give out matzah to some people. And I happened to go inside with my father, Olav Hashalom. And there was a young boy, some of you remember the name. His name was Ari Halberstam. Ari Halberstam was later killed on the Brooklyn Bridge in 1994. And Ari Halberstam's father happened to be a Meshamesh. He used to help out in the Rebbe's house when his wife was still alive. So I saw Ari Halberstam, who was a kid, went over to the Rebbe and said, my mother asked if you would come over to our Seder. He lived just a few houses away from 770 on 706 Eastern Parkway. Literally a 2-minute walk if you would come over. And the Rebbe was very gracious and very thankful and asked him to thank his mother, but he said, no, he's going to stay here. The Rebbe's secretary, he had a secretary who was very close to him, stuck around, and he thought he'll be there at the Seder, and then he'll go home, he'll do, his kids will be with his wife, and he'll go home later. And the Rebbe says, what are you doing here? He says, I'm here for the Seder. He says, no, you have a family, go. And then the Rebbe had another person who helped him in the house. He also wanted to stay, go. He sent everybody away. Everybody go do the Seder with your family. And from that Pesach, all the Pesachs for the rest of his life, he did the Seder completely himself. There was not one more person in his room. The Manashtana himself, the Haggadah himself, because he would come outside like everybody, open the door and go back in to do the Seder himself. I was a boy, I saw this, and I thought to myself, this is somewhat sad and tragic. Here's a man who had hundreds and thousands of students, millions of people who were touched and inspired by him. Every Jew, every Tom, Spaghetti, and Henry has somebody to do a Seder with. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe had not one person to do a Seder with. It was hard for me to understand himself. There was something very sad about it. I never understood why. He could have sat with one person, 2 people, 3 people. He didn't want to burden anybody maybe because they all had families, but it's still a little strange. The Rebbe arranged that there should be thousands of Sdorim around the world. Probably because of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, 500,000 Jews have where to go on Pesach, or 1,000,000 Jews, and he himself couldn't have a Seder with anybody else. So I want to tell you, the person who wrote this letter, when I saw your letter, I have a little bit of an answer. I'm not sure this is true, and I can't say it's untrue. I'm just telling you a feeling. It may be true, it may not be true, but maybe it can give you a little comfort. A real leader of Jews has to think about every Jew, including those that nobody thinks about. Real Manhigei Yisrael encompass in their soul every type of Jew. And maybe the Rebbe knew that one day there's going to be a person like you who's going to do a Seder alone, completely alone, without anybody else. And you may feel that it's not a Seder, it's not Pesach, it's not real, God is not even there. This is not Zman Cheresenu, you're alone in the world. And the Rebbe was maybe showing you that no, he created a paradigm that sometimes a Jew is alone at the table with nobody else but he and Hashem. And trust me, by the Rebbe, it was a Seder. If there was a Seder, it was a Seder. So your Seder was also a Seder. A real Jewish leader in his heart encompasses every Jewish heart, the most broken and the most lonely. I don't know why this happened to you. And I certainly hope that this Pesach you'll have a lot of company, your children and any other company that you're going to have. And I hope it's a very exciting and social Seder. But I want you to know that you shouldn't look at your Seder as worthless and meaningless and pointless. Because you can never judge the nature and the value of a Seder. And at your Seder, we also said Nirtzah. I want to tell you a story that happened to me. It's a personal story that happened to me once, Pesach. In 1997, I spent Pesach in a city called Kobe, Japan. Because the other choice was to spend Pesach in Brooklyn. What does a good Jewish boy have to do Pesach in Brooklyn? That's what everybody does. So I decided I wanted a more meaningful Pesach. So I thought in Japan, it would be a little more interesting for me. So I went with a friend. There's a community in Kobe, a few thousand Jews, a beautiful shul. They don't have a rabbi. So they asked if somebody could come down, run the Seder. So they asked me. So I went with a friend. We went the week before Pesach. We went with a lot of food. We went to the shul. We kashed the kitchen. And we prepared for the Seder. And we asked the people in the shul, how many people do you expect here at the Seder? They said, usually we have 20 people that come to the Seder, and we needed somebody to run it. And the davening over Pesach. I said, great. In the meantime, we thought to ourselves, why 20? I'm sure there's many more Jews in Kobe. So we put a little ad in Japanese. We spread the message that there's going to be a public Seder in the shul in Kobe, Japan, for any Jew who likes. No previous background necessary. No knowledge necessary, no observance now. Whoever is a Jewish could come to the Seder. And whoever we met, we asked them to tell their friends and colleagues and post it and send it out. I mean, then there was not much social media at the time. It's the late 90s, not like today. But the word viral meant you have a virus. It was a pretty bad thing. Today it can also be a pretty bad thing, depends what goes viral. But yes. Closure meant you have to close your zipper, whatever, different words, different things. So we spread the message to the best of our ability. It's going to be a Seder. I remember we davened Ma'ariv the first night of Pesach. I came out to the social hall. There were 250 people there who came to the Seder. The leaders of the shul almost died on the spot. This was like a crisis of the century. They had right away a meeting of the board. You know when boards meet? I knew it's going to be oy va'avoy, behind closed doors. The meeting was, what do we do with the crisis? So many Jews came, and they made a resolution. What's the resolution? A classic Jewish resolution. We're throwing everybody out, besides the people, the 20 people who signed up a week ago. Most people didn't sign up. We're throwing everybody out. I went to the board, and I said, listen, you have here 250 Jews. Many of them probably did not have a Seder in 10, 20, 30 years. How could you throw them out? They said, it's not fair. This is not a hefke place. I'm like, sure, this is very organized. Yeah, Kobe. There's a Seder, there's a system. You can't just come. I said, what's the real issue? Is the real issue money? You're afraid of money because they're going to eat extra gefilte fish that you saved up for tomorrow night. So it's going to be an extra. They said, yeah, money. I said, you know what? It's on me. I'll cover all the expenses of every bite that anybody above 20 eats. More than, they say, how are you going to know? I say, you know what? I'll pay for the first 20 also. I'll pay for the first 20. It's fine. They got so excited. They said, okay, they could stay. So we had to reprogram everything. We started the Seder. I looked at the faces. It was a tremendous moment. Now, these days you have to keep on moving, you know. It's not like your father could torture you and you don't have a choice. They can all leave. B'chal Seder, you have to keep on moving. That's B'chal the Seder. B'chipazon. The Jews left in haste. B'chipazon. There was a reason for it. Because if not, you stay in Mitzrayim. So you have to keep things moving. You have to keep things moving. B'chipazon. Second night, Mela, people are more relaxed. The first night, Afikoman, Chatzois, you have to go, you have to move. You have to move. So we're moving it. I have to tell you, the people knew nothing about a Seder. So they ate Shulchan Aruch, they did in the middle of Karpas. Koirich they did before Magid. Maror they did before Kiddush. Matzah they did after this. It was a pure churban. It was absolute chaos. As much as I was trying to control, they were like, whoa. They finished 6 cups of wine before I started the second cup of wine. The manashtana happened after the meal. They saw the kitch, the chicken, the knedlach. It was an absolute disaster. On every level, the Seder was what should I call it? It was a bankrupt Seder. It didn't make sense. Halachically, it was a calm. Okay, fine. Came Shulchan Aruch. Now, you know, when you're sitting with 250 Jews, it's not their fault that I thought there was a disaster. They enjoyed it. They kept on complimenting the gefilte fish, which was jarred gefilte fish. Now, you know, if your wife would serve you jarred gefilte fish, you'd probably ask for a divorce. So I knew that they must have been in Japan for so many years if they are enjoying the jarred gefilte fish. Okay, because in Japan you don't have jarred gefilte fish or chrei. Anyway, in the middle of Shulchan Aruch, after the soup, I thought I could say now a few words, a little more relaxed. So I got up and I thought to myself, what should I tell this crowd? And I remembered a story, a well-known story about Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev with the Seder. And I thought, this is the story that should be told. It popped into my head at that moment as I was thinking about what to say. So I said, I want to tell everybody a story. Many, many years ago, there lived one of the great, holy, spiritual masters of the Jewish people, Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev. It was one Passover in the morning, I told them. In the middle of prayer, he had a vision. He asked God, which was the most beautiful, inspiring Seder in Berditchev? So God said, Moshele the water carrier. So the Berditchevists summoned after davening Moshele the water carrier. And he comes to the holy Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev. Berditchev tells him, tell me about your Seder last night. So Moshele the water carrier says, Rebbe, I swear to you, I will never do it again. He's like, do what again? He says, Rebbe, please don't make me say what I did. It's too humiliating. He refused until the Berditchev said, B'koyach HaTorah, I am commanding you to tell me what you did last night. So he says, Rebbe, you know I have an alcoholic problem. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I drink all year. I'm a depressed soul. I got no money. My wife doesn't like me. I grew up an orphan. I never had a home. I never had nurture. I drink. The problem is chametz. The problem is vodka is chametz. 8 days without drinking. What am I supposed to do? This is before Shlivovitz. In Berditchev, they didn't have it. What do I do? So I decided the night of Bedikat Chametz, I'm going to drink a whole night. And hopefully, Sevet Mistayin, it will have an impact for 8 days. I drank and drank and drank, and then I saw 9 o'clock in the morning was the time you have to stop eating chametz. I said one last l'chaim, I downed it, and I was out. I'm a chai, I was out. My wife wakes me up, says, Moishele, Moishele. Everybody's coming home from shul to do the Seder. It's time to get up. I say, my wife, I have a headache, I have a hangover, I can't get out of bed. Wake me up in an hour. She wakes me up the next hour, I couldn't get it together. Another hour. She wakes me up at midnight and she says, you should be ashamed of yourself. Every house in Bedikat had a Seder besides your house. You are a disgrace to your family. But I just couldn't get it together. I said, give me one more hour. An hour later, I woke up. It was the middle of the night. All my kids were sleeping. My wife said, you should be ashamed with yourself. Not one of your children had a Seder tonight. I woke up my kids and I said, I need a half an hour at the table with you. They came begrudgingly to the table. I looked at my children and I said, listen, you were cursed with a horrible father. I have a horrible addiction. I'm an alcoholic. But if my addiction could cause me not to do a Seder on Pesach, it means I really, really lost it. So for starters, I swear that from today on, I will never drink again. But it's Pesach, so we have to do something. He says, Kinderlach, you know I don't know how to read Hebrew. I don't know how to read the Haggadah. I'm an illiterate. I'm not educated. I don't know anything. But there's a mitzvah that I'm supposed to tell you the story tonight. So let me tell you the story in my own words. This is the story. God created the world in 6 days. It was a beautiful world. On the 6th day, He created Adam and Eve, and it was still a beautiful world. He told them, nurture the garden, but stay away from one tree. Of course, they could not. They ate from that tree, and from then, the world started to go downhill. Everything started to go downhill. Then came Abraham and Sarah, and they started to heal the world. They started to bring back the original light into the world. But lo and behold, all of their children and descendants were thrown into an exile. And on this night, the master of the world liberated his people from the Egyptian bondage, and he set them on a course of freedom. But you know what? He says to the Kinderlach, we have a problem. The problem is these people are again in exile now. Also with tremendous problems. But here we are. And he looks up, he said, I look up to heaven, I say, Ribono Shel Olam, Father in heaven. First of all, I want to thank you for taking us out of Egypt. I want to thank you for making us your people. And I want to ask you, do it again. Just like you did it then. Do it again. Take us out. And I said, Kinderlach, now it's time to drink. I drank 1 cup, I ate matzah, I drank a cup, I ate matzah, I ate maror, I ate a sandwich, I drank another cup, and I was out again. My Seder took around 12 minutes, 15 minutes, it was done. The Bedikat is now crying. He looks at the Rebbe of Bedikat and he says, Rebbe, I told you, I swear to you, I'm never going to do this again in my life. So the Bedikat of Bedikat turns to the people around him. And he says, it hurts, you hear? Halavai, once in my life I should be able to communicate Judaism to my children, like Moishele communicated Judaism to his children last night. Halavai, once in my life I should be able to experience a Seder with authenticity, with rawness, like Moishele's Seder. And he says, Moishele, Nish gedaiget, Nirtzah. God loved your Seder. Not only loved it, it was the best Seder in Bedikat. Have a good Yom Tov. I looked at the crowd. I saw that the story stirred up emotion. And I said to them, why am I telling you this story? I said, I'll be honest with you. I grew up in an observant Jewish home in New York. We have a couple of Jews there. Our Seder always followed Jewish law meticulously. We did everything in the right way, always. Suddenly I came to Japan, and everything here was a disaster. Not one thing was done right. Everything was out of order. Everything was eaten in the wrong times, drunk in the wrong times, misplaced. I don't know what to tell you. So on one level, I felt a little bad. Then I reminded myself this story, and I thought to myself, maybe it's possible that if I were to ask God tonight which was your favorite Seder from the whole world? God would say, Kobe, Japan. I would say, why? And God would say, because it was real. It was authentic. It was raw. There were no shtick. Nobody was copying anything. Nobody was fitting into anybody else's structure. Nobody was stressed out. Everybody came here voluntarily. They were just being Jewish. They were being real. I love the Seder. And I said to them, I'm not the Baditchever. I don't have these conversations with God. But I have a hunch that this may have been from the top 10 in the world. And I want to thank you for giving me the privilege, a Brooklyn, New York boy, to have such a Pesach with you. I finish. I'm standing here, mamish at the head table. This is the head table. It was like a ches. Mamish against me. At the other side, there's a woman sitting there who was sitting there a whole Seder. And I see she is weeping. Pashat, mamish like a baby sitting and crying. Klippet, sie weint und sie klippet. Naturally, as a good Jew, I always blame myself. So I ask myself, what did I say that was offensive? I always think, did I say something that was insulting? Did I put down women? Did I put down people? I never know. People are sensitive. I started to ask myself, what did I say? Then I thought to myself, I didn't say. I said nice stuff here. She's crying. I don't know. It's really none of my business. Okay, next. I finished the speech. We ate the Afikoman. We benched. 95% of the crowd left. Stayed with a few, 4 or 5 people. We finished Hallel. We finished Nirtzah. We sang Haggadah, Echad Mi'edeya. And then we schmoozed. Ad she'higia zman krishma shel shachris. When we finished the Seder, she comes over. And she says, Rabbi Jacobson, can I have a few private words with you? I say, sure. She says, I want to tell you my story. I'm here in Japan for 25 years. But I grew up where you grew up. I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in New York, in a Jewish home. She experienced a very, very shallow, meaningless, negative form of Judaism. It's not the place to elaborate. She left completely. And where did she go to? She went to Japan. Became an educator in Japan for 25 years. She says, for 25 years I haven't been at a Seder. A few days ago I met a friend who happens to be Jewish. And this friend tells me, I heard that there's going to be a Seder in the synagogue in Kobe. Maybe you want to come? I say, I'm not part of it anymore. I'm done. Come, just come, culture. I asked, will there be gefilte fish? He said, yeah. He said, 25 years I didn't have a gefilte fish. I'm going to come for the gefilte fish. I'll come. She said, I said to her, what's the worst thing? I'll see a couple of Jews, I'll get upset again, and I'll leave. What's the worst thing that can happen? She says, I came, and I enjoyed it. It was very nice. But then you open your mouth, you started to talk. And I want to tell you something. I had a grandmother who lived with us in the house when I was a little girl. She was an elder woman. And she used to tell me, you come from very, very holy blood. So I asked my grandmother, what type of holy blood do I come from? She said, we had a great grandfather. I'm 8th generation and you're 10th generation. His name was Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. So I asked my grandmother, who in the world was Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev? She says, oh, I don't know. I just know that he was a very, very special and holy man. That's what I heard from my parents or grandparents. And he'll be here for you. He'll always be here for you. If you need something, you ask him to pray to God, he'll be here for you. He was a lover of the Jewish people. She says, I came here very, very cynical, very detached. I thought a little gefilte fish. You open your mouth and suddenly I hear the name of Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev. And you tell a whole story, how from Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev's perspective, this Seder, my Seder, was the best Seder in the world. So I want you to know that my grandfather probably sent you here to be able to make me feel at home, because I was feeling alienated. But through my grandfather, you made me feel at home. I felt that this was a real Seder. And I want to thank you for being his messenger, for bringing me home. And that's why I burst out crying in the middle of the story. These were the words she told me. She finished. I wiped a tear from my eye, and I thanked Almighty God for bringing me to Kobe, Japan. So you want to know what type of Seder to make in your house? If you can have a glimpse of the Seder of Moshe the water carrier, you'll have a Seder. But you don't need the drinking. Have a wonderful night, a wonderful week, and a kosher and a freilich Pesach.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.